working. Man, had some problems with the fucking stream getting started. Can I hear this? Is the sound gonna work? Come on. There it goes. Alright. Let's go through the hand reviews and then we'll decide what we want to do from there. It is Sunday. It's a play day, so who knows? Alright. King, Queen. This first section is the tournament hands. King, Queen suited. I entered the tournament late. So we see a raise in first. Call on the button. This is one of those ones where if I was to 3-bet, it would be the 10 big blinds. Puts more than a third of my pot in the stack, so I just jam it. Get called out of first, and pocket aces. Why did I put this one in here? I think this is an example of when you have to shove, but I forget. Either way, some of those hands are just in there for things I'm doing from videos or whatever. See a raise here out of first. I decided to go ahead and just call because I do have a stack that can get in, but this player opening in first, I don't know how willing he is to get all in. So there's a lot of big stacks behind. This guy had been very aggressive. So I decided to just call. Unfortunately, we just get called a bunch of ways. Now this does happen sometimes. The decision's still pretty easy with the overpair. I have the ace of spades, so there's not too many spade draws. Sure, there could be sets out there, but with 14 in the pot and 30 behind, we're not really going anywhere. So I just bet enough to commit myself to the pot and usually get it all in. We get raised all in, but go ahead and call it off. Opponent shows over the other pair of 2 9s. And this is the funny part to me, which is I'm betting, like this is just where my head comes from. I have 30 blinds, there's 14 in the pot. There's 5 people in this pot, and I'm betting into 4 of them as the original raiser. This jam is just kind of gambling. Like, you could actually call here if you wanted to with 9s and see if I bet the turn. And, you know, I obviously, in this situation, would have checked because I have the ace of spades and I'm trying to get the money in. And it would have just been another 22 blinds into 30 blinds, so it would have been pretty easy to do. But if I was to check here, you know, having ace king or ace queen or something like that, and we were heads up, then you could jam and you're actually better off, especially if you were holding the 9 of spades, which he was. So I think this is one where, yeah, you're going to go broke a lot because the blinds aren't great, but you could also 3-bet, right? Like you had a middle stack opener. I, you know, just called it. And this player, you know, just called it too. He could have 3-bet. And if he 3-bets and the original raiser folds and then I jam, I mean, he can reasonably get away from it. Now, granted, I'm not going to make those mistakes, but I'm just saying I don't think this is a great play by the villain. You're kind of just gambling at this point, hoping your hand is good enough, because what's going to fucking call you on this flop? You know, that you beat. I raise out of first. See a call on the button and the small blind. Make top pair. Player leads out for about 70% pot, a little more than that. I decided to just go ahead and call because to me this is either a draw or this is never a hand that beats top pair. Usually this is like a draw, this is some bullshit, whatever. Player behind calls, which was my real concern. Player makes the same bet now, same number of chips. This is just the weakest shit I've ever seen. I decided to go ahead and just call it again. Don't really feel like I'm beat. Ace on the river is nice, but again, I didn't really feel like I was beat. I just went ahead and bet half pot for value, and it was an instant fold. This to me was like, it could have been something like 6-8. It could have been something like, I guess it could be like 7-8 maybe, but I have a 7 in my hand. I really don't know what this player was trying to accomplish. He could have had 8-9. I guess that makes sense. Kind of, because he bets big on the flop, trying to take it down with his equity, and then on the turn he just kind of bet twice. The second bet is just ridiculous. And I saw this player do this a few times, and I don't think it worked for him once. So I really don't know where the fuck he got these chips or what that move is supposed to accomplish. I really don't get it. Ace queen raising out of first. Get called on the big blind. Comes out king high. Not the best, not the worst. I decide to bet range. I do get called. Queen on the turn is pretty good for my hand. I decide to go ahead and bet again. And my reasoning for betting here is that it kind of looks like a bet. But if I had ace king, I would bet the same way, just for value to protect against a flush draw. And I truly believe my queen is good here, because it would be a hell of a coincidence for him to have a king that he can defend and then doesn't want to check raise this flop or doesn't want to lead the turn or something like that. So I just went ahead and bet the turn for value and protection and just got the fold. And I really think I was just up against like a spade draw or maybe like a pair and a gut shot or something like that. So I like betting it there. It's the same hand as having, you know, ace king. Let's see here. Queen jack, I raise out of first. Get 3-bet, decide to go ahead and call it. Flop the nizzly. Goes check. I think this is just a funny hand that I decided to highlight because I cut it out for, yeah, it is. I cut it out for a video. I just call, turn comes off with the floosh, a floosh draw, and he just jams all in, and it's just a cooler. And it's just a big hand. But it makes a good case for playing hands, you know what I'm saying? Like, the queen jack in first isn't great, but when it's suited, you can definitely get in situations like this where, you know, you cooler somebody. You just got to understand that top pair queen is not going to be good enough to lose a lot of money. Ace 10 suited, raise out of first, get called. Flop comes off 9 high, not really great. I'm kind of betting like I have an overpair, like 10s or jacks or something. I get called, king on the turn. This isn't great. If I had bet smaller on the flop, this bet makes more sense. But then again, I should have more kings in my range than my opponent. So I really feel like I'm just up against a flush draw. He does call, big old deuce on the river. I now turn the hand. The hand's now become bet. The only problem is I bet the flop a little bit too big, but I think it's fine. Player goes away. This shouldn't have been as much of a risk by the river, but I think it's okay. I honestly think this is just one where I just had to bet the river because you don't want to get beat by like somebody who has ace deuce suited and they now made the deuce, you know what I'm saying? So betting the river is very important there. Jack 6 in the big blind, get raised, I call. Flop comes off ace high. Player bets micro, I call. Pick up a flush draw. Check it again, player checks back. 7 on the river. I decide to go ahead and cold lead. And this is one where if my opponent has me on a draw, he's gonna call me, but at the same time I could have a 3, I could have an ace, I could have 5-6, I could have deuce 5. I'm in the blind, I could have anything, and realistically he can fold a hand as strong as a pair of 10s or jacks here. I think much beyond that he kind of has to call me, even though it seems like the same thing. It's kind of not. So this one works. It's a nice little move. It's just that, you know, flop, float, turn, check, river bet. Player limps on the button with 14 blinds. I decide not to raise because of the simple fact that he only has 14 blinds, and if I make any kind of raise, he's just going to get it in. And yeah, I have 90 blinds, and I have an ace, but it's not worth it to risk it. I flop 2 pair. I check. Player bets half pot. We decide to go ahead and check raise right here. He does call. Turn comes off the full house, and there's no reason to bet here. He's only got 9 or 10 blinds left. There's 12 in the middle. I check. He checks back. I decide to bet the river. This is the small super bet where I try to get him to raise all in at a quarter pot on the river. Is super small. He does just call it, and which is good because hilariously this guy limped the King Dewey on the button and just tried to superhero me. So I don't think a full pot bet would have worked. I don't think he would have gone broke. I think this is one where we gave him an opportunity to break himself, you know, when he wants to go for the bluff. Or when he does happen to have an ace. But we obviously got the most out of this, I think, that I could. Because that's just a ridiculous factor. You could give me 1,000 guesses, I'd never come up with King Deuce. Raise out of first. I go ahead and 3-bet out of second. Folds around to the under the gun. He just calls. Flop comes off Queen High. Player checks. I decide to go ahead and bet standard 1/3 pot. Player check raises. All in. And this is the funny part, is that when this happened, before I made the bet, I said if this guy check raises jams on the flop, I have to call. There's literally no hand here that he should do that with that beats me. And I called, and ta-da, he just had a gut shot and one overcard. So I have him pretty much crushed 82% of the time. Turn comes off, he picks up a club draw. River comes off, he makes a club. But we got him to put it in with only a 20% chance to win. Really sucked to lose that hand at that point, because that would have been a big pot. I did go very far in this tournament. Ended up in 14th, taking a 2-outer beat. But at the same time, that's just one where his move doesn't work because of the math, and because what hand is he check jamming the flop with that actually beats ace king there? He never has a queen. The only hand that he can ever have is truly aces or kings, and I have an ace and a king in my hand, so it's really not a factor. But yeah, it was a snap call from me, and I said for value at the time. I'm in raise. I get called by a player who has... Oh, this is a funny hand. This player has 14 blinds, and he just calls me. Now, the funny part is we're barely in the money at this point. So I don't know what's going on here. Oh, god damn it. So he just calls me. Button calls, which is hilarious. Small blind calls. Big blind folds, which is more hilarious. I mean, this guy's getting the best price he's ever going to get. 11 to 1 on a call, but whatever. Comes off ace 6-9. Of course, I go ahead and just bet. I know that this player is going to be all in a large percentage of the time. They're just going to have a raggedy ace or a flush draw or something. The player does go all in. It folds back to me, and I call. And this is another one where I could not have guessed for the life of me. And hilarious. I only have a 25% chance to win, but binkety bink, it's all over on the turn. You can have a full house too, buddy, but you can't win. So I don't know what the fuck he's thinking. This goes back to like having the suited connector and playing it here for... He doesn't even have enough chips to start the hand. He doesn't even have 20 to 1 to start the hand to play this. I could respect if he had just jammed it and been like, you know what, live cards, I got 14 blinds, we're in the cash, let's go, man. But then to just call it is fucking hilarious. So there's really no accounting for what people think is a good idea. And poker's not dead. That's the thing we learned from this. Let's see here. Is that the last one? Let me see. Where's my ace king 10-10? There we go. Raised on the button, gets called. I decided to just call in this scenario. A lot of times I'll 3-bet, but we're all very deep and we're getting further into the cash. This is a 50-50 for me. I think if this player had been a different kind of player who played more reasonably, I would have 3-bet, but was kind of weird, would do weird shit, so I decided just to avoid the problem and just call. Check, player bets, fairly standard, maybe a little bit weird. I decide, obviously, I'm not folding for one bet. Turn comes off a 7, goes check. I should be good here a ton. I decide to check and allow the opponent to bet. He, unfortunately, checks, and we can see why he checks is because he was just absolutely, utterly fucking around. I don't think there's a bet he can make on the river here unless he, overbet 2x pots that I'm really folding to. I've seen players just snap full pot bet this on the river, and it's just like, what are you doing? And you just snap call them. So kind of a weird play. After this hand, it kind of instructed me a little bit more how to play against the player, so I did start 3-betting him from the blinds more. And I don't think we played one hand together after I did that. Ace Jack in the big blind. We see a raise here and a 3-bet here. I wanted to run this one because we are super deep in this tournament at this point. I have 12 blinds. I wanted to run this one because it's kind of brutal. But honestly, I don't think it really serves much purpose. Because the guy on the button, he's really the only range we're considering here. He knows he has no fold equity, so, he's basically in here with all the pairs. He's in with king, queen offsuit, ace, king suited, ace, jack, ace, 10, ace, jack, king, jack. I think he's in there with reasonable ranges, maybe even queen, jack suited, king, 10 off. I think realistically we can even give him most of the suited aces, so I'm just going to give him the bottom ones. I think this is fine. If we apply this here and then run my exact hand against it, ace of diamonds, jack of hearts. This is really just me looking at something to see how it does. Yeah, it's 50-50, and I thought it might be close. But if the player is a little bit more solid, I'm going to put the fours back in. Yeah, it's close. Maybe I should have just gone with it. And I did end up doing well and finding a better spot, but it's just so weird. And the thing of it was that I really wasn't expecting this player to fold. So if you're talking about adding his range in too, then you're talking about, hands down like this that'll call, hands like this that'll call. So like when called, I think this is fairly reasonable because it's so cheap. You got to remember. So in this scenario, my ace jack is, 25%, right? Yeah, I probably still should have went with it because I'm gonna get 3-1 almost on my money here. Because if this guy calls, there'll be 12, 24, 33, 34, 35, 36. Yeah, I'm getting 3-1 with 25%. I only have to win 25% of the time. That's pretty much perfect. When you're getting 3-1. But it was close, and I knew it was close. I did find a better spot. But, whatever. I just wanted to kind of look at it. I have a problem with ace-jack, not racing ace-jack enough. It's one of those problem spots for me, so I like looking over stuff like that. We see a raise, and I decided to go ahead and jam. There's really no other issue here. This player is coming out of the low jack, so his perceived range, it's reasonable, but I think pocket tens is definitely high up. I think this is another one I wanted to run, but I think it's kind of pointless because ace king, ace queen, king queen, any pair, all those are going to raise, so this is perfectly fine. It's just where I busted the tournament, so I kind of wanted to look at it, but it's kind of silly. It doesn't really need to happen. Let's go over to it doesn't really need to be looked at. Let's go over to the cash games. I was just kind of annoyed at the time, so I marked it. Just because it's a cooler. Alright, the old ace king. This is the blitz poker. We see a raise and I see a limp and a raise, which is interesting. I decided to 3-bet to figure out what's going on. This player calls. Everybody knows what this guy has, right? Cool. I call, the original raiser folds, and now there's 35 in the pot. I have flop top pissed off pair. This player jams all in. I did not hesitate. I think I actually burned my finger with how quickly it moved through the atmosphere getting to the call. So I did just call it off. And ace 7. And this is another example of poker not being dead. Just wanted to point that out. 4-5 off. I like these little suited hands every now and then. Second position, it can be fun. It goes all the way around. We're 5 ways to the pot or to the flop, and I flop a pair and a gut shot and a flush draw. It's pretty much the best as it's gonna get. This player now bets 3/4 pot or 75% pot. I decide to just call, thinking one of these players may call behind. Plus, I'll end up in position on this player. Turn is a 10. He now bets 12.5. I decided to go ahead and just call it. I feel like I'm ahead anyway. River comes off and make a straight flush. Player bets 37.50. He has 213 behind, and I decided to go ahead and rip it because I figured it's one of two things. He's either got nothing, like ace-king, and it's just going bet, 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 or he has some kind of overpair and maybe a player not good enough to get away from it. His bets were very calculated. Most players realize that you have to bet bigger on the river here. I think that's where he made his mistake. If he was going bet, 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 I'm not folding a straight here. I'm not folding 2 pair here to this betting structure. I'm just calling him. But obviously, I'm going to raise him with the pure nuts, and he does fold. So it's just a bad example of the bet, bet, bet practice that works a lot because of the players he's playing against. Ace, king. I raise. Just a call. Make an ace. I decide to go ahead and bet standard. I get called. Club on the turn, not a huge concern really. I decide to bet 2/3 pot, get called. River comes off with 9s. I went for the value bet here, and a lot of times players miss this value bet, and I used to be one of those guys, and in cash games, this is a value bet you're going to make every time. You make it pretty heavily in tournaments too, but there are good reasons to check at certain points in tournaments. But essentially, your hand is the nuts. I mean, the only thing that's going to happen here is you're going to get check raised on the river, and that's only going to happen with a full house or a flush. Nobody's doing that with ace jack. But with somebody has, ace queen or ace 10 or, ace 8, just any rag ace that now it's aces and 9s with the jack, they're going to call you amazingly, thinking that you're both chopping because of optimism on the fish's part. He folds, but I was really happy that I made this bet. I'm glad when I recognize these spots. It should always be bet. Player raises. I decide to go ahead and call on the button. I make a 4. Player bets super small, not standard. I decide to just call it. Get check raised over here by this player. I still call because this shouldn't be much. This is very specific. It could be something like king queen for sure. But it also couldn't be a set of deuces. And it's just not a lot of hands that I'm doing too poorly against. The turn comes off an ace. Player bets 1640. And I have decided that this bet now makes zero fucking sense whatsoever. Because really the only hand you can check raise that flop with is a set. Because if somebody has ace king, like the original raiser coming out of first, then yeah, you're going to get paid. But what other hands check raise that flop? I really couldn't find one. Maybe 3-5, but that's super rare. You know what I'm saying? It's the only draw. So when he bets half pot here, here's the thing. If you're protecting something like 4 deuce or, a king 4 or some like weird hand like that where you've now made 2 pair, you're going to bet bigger. You know what I'm saying? Because you're going to have good value. If you have a hand like king queen, you're not betting here. If you have a hand like ace jack, you're not betting here. If you were just going for a pure bluff or you had like ace 3 or ace 5, you're not betting here. So none of these hands make sense, and his half pot bet just kind of told the tale. So I got to go ahead and make the big old raise, just 3x his shit and a little more. And he folds. And it just was one of those ones where it just totally seemed like bullshit. And if you think about it after the fact, there's a reason why it seems like bullshit. Now, if I didn't have the 4, can I play this move? It's kind of debatable because it removes another combination of sets and 2 pairs when I have a 4 in my hand. I obviously don't play a king this way. I just allow him to keep bluffing. But I think this is a good one where it can look like I have a suited ace and I just made 2 pair. You know what I'm saying? I can have ace deuce or ace 4, and it looks like I just made 2 pair on the turn. Or I could have had a set the whole time. It just looks super strong. And I like this move, and I've been doing it quite a bit more. I started doing it about 2 weeks ago. I raise. I get 3-bet. I decide to go ahead and call with the 10-8. Flop comes off 5-5-7. Player's pretty big stacked. He's been pretty active, all that shit. He goes ahead and bets fairly standard, about a 1/3 pot, a little less. I float it. Turn comes off a 9. I do make the open ender now. So I have a lot of outs. Now look, here's this same deal. If you had something real here, you would bet more or you would bet less. It depends on where you're at. If you had a 7s full, you would not bet this much. If you had an overpair, you would bet more. You would bet in the 20-22 range. You know what I'm saying? Because what am I calling you with? You know what I'm saying? Am I calling you with a draw? If I am, I just got there. You know what I'm saying? I mean, what hands can continue here? So why are you betting like this? This is not... You know what I'm saying? If I'm going to call you, if I have like a pair of 10s, like or sixes, and I'm thinking about calling you, you're going to make me pay more if you have aces. So this bet obviously looked really fishy, and here's the move again, and we went bigger this time, and I think it merits the raise here that we made, because basically what I'm doing is I'm looking like I'm committed to the pot. Now, is this a good move because I have the open ender? Yeah. I have an escape hatch. So if this guy jams all in, this isn't even a thought process. You just call, and hopefully your straight is good if you hit it. But yeah, he just goes ahead and folds. And we get to take down another really nice pot, just paying attention to somebody's timing and betting structure. And it's an interesting play, and it's come in so handy. And I'm actually about to make a video with that hand included in there. So this player raises out of first. I call. This player, for some reason, min raises. This could be a misclick. I don't know. This player did do a lot of dumb shit. So maybe it was just a total fucking stupid move to take the lead away. We all call. I have flopped pretty damn good equity. It goes check, check, check. Player now bets the full pot. Comes back to me. I don't buy this for a second. What ace are you min raising that you're now betting the full pot with? I don't see it. So I go ahead and just pot it right here and take it right down. And that's a perfectly fine result. I don't think I'm beat, but then again, if any card higher than 9 comes out that's not a diamond, I could definitely lose control of this pot. His move just made no sense. And this is kind of wacky shit I was talking about. And when that happens, it's like, okay, why not? You know? All right. So, here's the next section. It is now... How far are we into the stream here? We're currently 26 minutes in. I'm looking to play at around 2 o'clock. Yeah, let's do a section here. This is the next section in the tournament masterclass. We're getting into some fun stuff where it gets, a little hairy. So let's go ahead and get into this for a couple of these sections.
Now that you know how to play when you have a medium stack size, let's discuss how to play as your stack to pot ratio continues to decrease. At this point, let's suppose we have 20 big blinds in our stack. Let's say someone raises to 2.25 big blinds, we call on the button, and then the blinds fold. In this scenario, the money in the pot is going to be 7 big blinds, right? 2.25 raise, or 2.25 call, and then the small blind, big blind, and ante. And the effective stack size is going to be 17.75 remaining, divided by 7 equals a stack to pot ratio of 2.5. So now we are pretty clearly going to be in the low stack to pot ratio category. Again, your standards for going all in will decrease as the stack to pot ratio decreases. That's because we're just not risking as much money, and we get to be wrong. We get to lose the pot more often. And at this point, if we just get like anything decent, we're pretty happy playing for all the chips. Again, you'll find that the implied odds hands really decrease in value at this point because we have
like
really
that
no
9-6
implied odds anymore. And remember, we wanted something like 20-1 implied odds with the suited connectors. Now we're just getting nowhere near that. And now the strong big cards really increase in value. Hands like ace 10 offsuit become decent. Ace 9 offsuit becomes decent. So with the stack depth, as with most scenarios, you're generally going to want to follow the implementable game theory optimal charts unless it becomes clear your opponents are making mistakes. However, you will find that very often you can just open raise with wider ranges if you're playing against players who rarely are going to 3-bet you. Because if you raise and they call very frequently, whereas they perhaps should be just going all in, as I'll show you in a bit, that allows you to see the flop and realize your equity. So if you happen to be playing in games that are relatively passive, you can raise with a wider range. You may find that you're in some games where your opponents just go all in with all sorts of stuff if you raise. If that's the case, then you should tighten up these ranges a bit. Remember, these ranges are just a guide. They should not be blindly followed in all scenarios. Okay, so now we're going to start to see a blue range here. This blue range is the all-in range. So you see under the gun and under the gun +1, we are still using a raise or fold strategy. But as we get in the later positions, we start to just open shove. We go all in when everyone folds to us. And you're going to find that the hands that usually go all in when everyone folds to you are usually going to be the small and medium pairs the good, strong, high card blocker hands, the suited aces, and then just really good high card suited connected hands. And if you take a look at, let's say, the Lojack strategy here, this is a strategy where you're going all in with these hands that just have relatively high value, but don't really want to raise and then base an all in themselves. And those hands are usually very strong to shove. Whenever we raise, we're raising with pocket sevens or better, ace 10 suited or better, king queen suited, and ace king, with the idea that we were going to call if someone goes all in. And with all these hands on the bottom of the raising range, we are raising these with the intention of folding if someone goes all in. So you see that our raising range is still very, very polarized, right? When we open raise, we are raising with the best hands planning to call it off, and the weaker hands looking to fold. Like on the button here, pocket sevens are better, ace queen offsuit, and ace 8 suited, king 10 suited, queen 10 suited. All these hands are going to call if someone goes all in. And all these other hands that are below the hands in blue, those hands plan to fold if someone does go all in. So again, compared to the deeper charts where we have 25 big blinds, you see in these scenarios we're just still min raising or raising to 2.25 big blinds with every hand in our range. Now we are playing a different strategy. So take a look here. Notice that we continue to have to play a little bit tighter from the later positions. We only get to play about 39% of hands from the button now, compared to 25 big blinds, we got to play 46% of hands. And that's because, again, positional advantage continues to diminish as stacks get shallower. You may find it very uncomfortable initially to just open shove all in whenever you do have a 15 big blind stack. You may think, oh, isn't that a lot to risk? It turns out, especially when there's an ante in play, it's not. If you're playing in tournaments without an ante, you should not open shove quite as often. But from positions like the button, you're going to find these low ace-x suited and low pairs really, really, really just want to open shove all in. That is going to be the most profitable play by a mile. So make sure you understand these charts. From the small blind, again, your strategy always depends on the player in the big blind. If your opponent will fold very frequently to a 2.5 or 3 big blind raise, you really should be raising really, really wide at this point, because stealing the pot before the flop is highly valuable. In this scenario, the minimum defense frequency, if you make it 3.5 big blinds, is going to be 33% for the player in the big blind. That means that if the big blind does not defend with at least 33% of their hand, even if your range has 0% equity, which obviously it doesn't, it has way more than that, you can raise with literally any 2 cards. You may find that some players will defend way tighter than 33% of hands. So this is a spot where it becomes very valuable to raise frequently if your opponent will fold frequently. How do you find that out? Well, you pay attention to how they play the other positions. If they're really tight in the other positions, they're probably going to be a little bit tighter in the big blind. If they're maniacal, well, they're just not going to fold very often, right? So you want to make sure you are paying attention to your opponent's overall strategy, and you can use that knowledge to make assumptions about their big blind strategy. Now, obviously, just because they're tight normally may not mean they're going to be tight in the big blind, but usually that's going to be the case, so definitely pay attention to that. However, here's a strategy if you want to use an implementable game theory optimal strategy, and you'll now notice that whereas we were raising or folding with the 25 big blind stacks and deeper for the most part, now we actually introduce a strategy where we have no small raises at all. So you see how I'm telling you, as a adjustment to this, you could actually raise to 2.5 or 3 or 3.5 big blinds very frequently. That is not part of the game theory optimal strategy at all. So remember, you're supposed to adjust to whatever your opponents do wrong. With 15 big blinds deep, as you see, this pattern generally holds true, where we are limping now with just a very wide range of our best hands and our worst hands, and we're open jamming again with these same hands that have lots of equity but don't really want to limp and get jammed on or raise and get jammed on. You may say, well, doesn't ace queen not care if you limp and get jammed on? No, but jamming this ace queen hand allows you to jam a few of these weaker hands like queen 6 offsuit and whatnot. So this is the strategy when everyone folds to you in the small blind. This may be very foreign to you, maybe very uncomfortable, but I'm telling you, if you use this strategy, it's going to be way more profitable than a strategy where you, let's say, like raise the 3 big blinds every time against the whole player pool, or a strategy where you just use an all-in or fold chart. You'll find that some people out there blindly follow an all-in or fold chart when playing 15 big blinds deep, but that is a substantial error.
That shit drives me fucking bananas, and it has for my entire fucking poker career. I have seen these fucking people, and they're still out there. There's still guys who are respected, good content creators. There's one that I'm thinking of in particular, and they base everything on these push-fold charts. Fuck your push-fold. There is more play in poker than push-fold. It's ridiculous. These guys have these push-fold charts that they follow, and they're pushing 10 big blinds with just ridiculously stupid shit. And it's just like there's more play involved. Like the ability to limp in the small blind with the intention of calling off is such a powerful thing. You would be fucking shocked how many times you have, 10 to 18 big blinds, something like that, and you're in the small blind with a hand you want to get it in with and you don't know how to do it. You would be fucking amazed how many times you can limp that hand, face a raise, and then based on the size of the raise, either jam all over it and know you're getting called, or just call and then jam all flops and know you're getting called. It would blow your fucking mind. And these people who use it, well, this is a push-fold chart. Push-fold doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It existed in fucking 2009 maybe, but there's people still holding on to this shit and they're like, well, mathematically I'm what? Fuck you. You're not even mathematically right. It is infuriating to me. I've had these screaming arguments with losing players trying to tell them. I had a guy tell me, I was in the big blind, he was in the small blind. I had like 70 blinds and he had 15. And he jammed and I had king jack suited. And I called and I rolled it over and he immediately went to how I was the worst player that ever was. And I went, well, what the fuck are you jamming? And he had 10-9 offsuit. And I was like, you're out of your fucking mind. And I spiked the jack and took him out. And it's hilarious to me because, like, even if you just look, I don't even know where 10-9 is off on here. 10-9 off is raise from, the small blind. He just went ahead and straight jammed it. And I was like, you realize that when you run into a better hand statistically, you're just going to get called, right? And he was like, yeah. And this is after the tournament. He literally, I had won the tournament, or we had chopped it like 4 ways. And, all like that. And it was a $60 buy-in. I got $1,000. It was pretty great. And he comes up to me after he was watching the tournament because his buddy was still in it. His buddy was a really good player and all like that. And he comes up to me and he's still going on about it. And he showed me an app on his phone. And I was like, dude, if I didn't like you at all, I would slap that phone out of your hand. You're looking at a push-fold chart, which is the dumbest thing you could ever fucking do. And his buddy, who was a good player, was like, well, I think there's some merit. And I'm like, yeah, keeping fish like him in the game. That's the merit of it. I'm like, but there's no point here. And he just would not let it go. And this is the thing that kills me, is that people don't evolve with the game. And then they hold on to these pieces. And you're just going to be the old man sitting there at the poker table 30 years from now bitching at people for playing wrong so you can't win. It's just fucking hilarious. So there's way more play. All the way down to 10 big blinds, there's still raises. There's honestly, sometimes there are still raises at 8 big blinds where you're going to raise and fold. Believe it or not, they're out there.
As you see here, if you use an all-in or fold chart, you would not be able to play nearly this wide of a range. But because you use the option to limp with all of these strong hands, that allows you to limp with weaker hands. Because when you limp, you make, with your strong hands, you make it to where your opponents just do not know if you have a really strong hand or a weak hand, which makes it to where they just can't jam all in on you all that often, and that allows you to play more hands profitably. You're going to find that the name of the game is playing as many hands as you can in a profitable manner, and sometimes that means playing your strong hands in a passive manner, because that will protect the other weaker hands in your range. So this is what you should do in Folded 2. Make sure you understand that this is very important. Make sure you go through the quizzes and get all the answers right, because this is actually where a whole lot of money is won or lost in tournaments. Usually when you're playing for the most amount of money in tournaments, sometimes you will be shallow stacked, and you want to make sure you do not mess up these scenarios.
It's true. The further you go in a tournament, the less blinds are available, the less blinds you're going to have. So knowing this stuff, means the difference between, and the other day it meant the difference between going out in 8th place and going out in 2nd place in a tournament. And that was a huge swing. I made like 20 times more by, lasting that long. It was crazy. And it was just knowing this stuff in the small blind and knowing when to limp and when to raise and when to jam. And it was really a really good part of that. So if you rewatch that final table and check out my small blind, you'll see how balanced that strategy was. I was really proud of it when I went back and reviewed it. Stack to pot ratio does at lower stack to pot ratio, the value of suited connectors goes up or down. Well, it goes down because, you know, you're gonna not have as many blinds to even play with. At 15 big blinds, should you ever go all in from under the gun? Yeah, there's times. I mean, let's look it up. I think hands like Ace Queen, I think, can get there. Pocket pairs like tens plus can get there. You're going to want to raise with stuff like aces and kings because you don't want to just jam that in and be stupid. But let's go to the tools. Under the gun, 15 big blinds. Let's see here. 15 big blinds, position is under the gun. Raise first in. Yeah, there's all ins here. There's a few. Not many. I guess I'm wrong, though. I guess there aren't a lot. 15 minutes. Should you ever go all in from under the gun? I mean, there's shades in here, but I'm guessing it's no, I guess. Although at the levels I play, I kind of disagree. Because raising with pocket tens is not the greatest play at my stakes, but I'm going to say that there's some conditions wrong. You always are more profitable to simply min-raise open than jam with so many players behind. Okay, a good general philosophy. Okay, I can agree with that. And it does follow the charts, so you know what? I'm with it. Okay, fine. If I feel like I have a hand I want to get it in, I'm going to get called looser. Like if I had pocket queens, maybe that's the move. But I guess that's correct. You're better off just raising. And, you know, if you raise all those hands, like, you know, nines plus or whatever, and you get 3-bet, you can then decide whether or not you want to go with it. So, okay, cool. Should you ever go all in from the Lojack at 15 big blinds? Well, yeah, there's definitely scenarios. Because, you know, the min-raising range, it's just going to incentivize people to call and defend too wide. So you're looking to win more pots, and you're doing it wider. So, like, if you look by in contrast from the Lojack, raising first in, there's quite a few actually. 10 jack, queen jack, king jack, ace queen, ace jack. These are just the good hands. You don't mind getting it in. And then these are the, you know, these are also good hands. But then these are like the steal attempts with blockers also, you know, stuff like that. The ace nine. The ace nine for me is a dividing line. I don't really like it very much. I think I'd rather jam ace 10 and just raise the ace nine just because of its removal factors. But maybe even leave alone the ace nine. It kind of depends, but you know, pocket fives, pocket sixes, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So I see what he's saying. He's saying keeping more play in your stack in earlier positions is better. Okay. Button 15 big blinds, action folds to you. You have 5-5. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's a jam, right? At my stakes, it's a jam, pretty much. I don't like a raise to 2 blinds. I really don't like that. But let's look it up. You're on the button with 15 blinds. I mean, it depends. If we're deep, then yeah. Pocket fives, all in. All right, cool. Don't need to overthink it. Min-raise, risk of being min-raised or faced an all-in, be in a difficult spot, right? You don't want to get 3-bet. Hijack, 15 big blinds, action folds to you, ace-3 suited. This I like a raise. The hijack for 15 big blinds, yeah, I like a raise with the ace-3 suited. Let's see. Hijack, raise first in, ace-3 suited. It's a raise 66% of the time, so it's correct. Although it is a third of the time it is an all-in, so I guess it depends on the players you're up against. So, yeah, I like the raise. You can fold it if you get jammed on, and if you get played with, you have an ace. So if you make an ace, you're kind of happy getting it in. You can make flush draws, you can make straights, you can make 2 pairs. Yeah, I like it. Cool. Market is complete. Let's see how long the next section is.
Now let's discuss when you raise and get 3-bet, when you have between 12 and 22 big blinds. So after you raise with a 22 big blind stack or shorter, most players will either fold, call, or go all in. And you will very rarely face a small 3-bet. There will be times where that happens. Often when, let's say, you have 22 big blinds or 20 big blinds, and everybody else has 50, they're not going to just shove over your raise for 50 big blinds because they have to worry about the other players yet to act. But for the most part, if everyone is somewhat shallow stacked, very rarely will you raise to 2 or 2.5 big blinds. They're going to 3-bet to 6. You just don't see people putting in 25 or 30% of their stack all that often, but sometimes it will happen. Whenever you are facing an all-in, though, realize you just have a simple math problem. I'm going to show you how to do that in just a minute. Also, following the charts I'm about to show you, assume you are fine breaking even, right? Remember how you want to have a little bit of edge built in, so you want to make sure that you do not blindly follow these charts. Also, adjust these charts a ton. If the opponent who went all in is tight and straightforward, you should be folding a large chunk of your range, right? If your opponent is a lunatic, well, then you should be defending even wider. Also realize your raises from late position will face more resistance. Also make sure you always consider your pot odds and post-flop playability if your opponent does make a smaller raise. So let's take a look at this. Here we are in early position versus an all-in. So if we raise under the gun or under the gun +1 and the cutoff goes all in, here's what we should do. We should call the hands in green, fold the hands in gray. Nice and easy, right? And you may say, if I raise pocket 8s and someone goes all in, I'm supposed to call? The answer is yes. You may find that maybe you're even calling too loose against some people. Maybe you call pocket 6s, or maybe you call ace-9 suited or ace-jack offsuit. When you raise early position and someone yet to act shoves, you really do have to be somewhat tight because, remember, your opening range was rather tight to begin with. So, as you see, all of these strategies pretty much make sense. You're going to find that you're defending at or above the minimum defense frequency in most of these instances. If any of these situations stand out as particularly odd, I don't really think so. All of these seem pretty intuitive to me. So here we have under the gun +1 against the small blind all in. You're going to find that usually you get to call the small blind a little bit more than the other positions. You may say, why is that? Well, that's because the small blind is incentivized to not really have much of a calling range, which means they're going to shove everything they play. Whereas if the big blind shoves, you see here we're actually calling a little bit less, 43 or 53% compared to 46%. You may think, shouldn't the big blind have a wider range, so I should call them more? Well, no. That's because the big blind is actually going to have a calling range against your pre-flop min raise, or 2.5 big blind raise. So this is a situation
because of the price that they end up with, because it only costs them 1.5 to call, so raising means that their hand is technically stronger because they are incentivized to call it and just, see the flop.
where you should call the small blind a hair more than you call the big blind. Let's now take a look at the middle position strategy. Here, notice we are open shoving with some of these hands that are in white. They are not in our range. They're not folded, right? These hands are open shoved all in pre-flop. And now whenever you start to use a very obviously polarized strategy, your decision becomes very, very easy, right? In this scenario, when we raise our best hands, we call off of our opponent's shove. When we raise our worst hands, we fold if our opponent shoves. Okay? And notice that this doesn't really matter based on our opponent's position all that much. I did want to point that out. Whenever you do use a very polarized strategy, the intention is usually just raise and call off with all the good value hands, raise and fold all of the bluffs. You may find it surprising that like king, queen offsuit is used as a bluff, but it is essentially a blocker bluff here. Same thing, king, jack, ace 10, etc. Everything else here looks pretty obvious to me, right? And you're going to find that the nice thing about very polarized strategies is that your response to an all-in is easy. Now, I do want to make it clear. If we do raise with this range, let's say the cutoff range, and then face an all-in from a very tight player, we should adjust. We must adjust. So let me show you how we can figure out what we should call with in Equilab and with a calculator. So in this scenario, say we raised to 15 big blinds. I'm sorry, say we started with 15 big blinds and we min raise. And then the cutoff, we raise from the cutoff with this range, and then someone else goes all in. There we go, we're getting it out. Let's say the player on the button goes all in, and we know them to be tight. So in this scenario, how much is going to be in the total pot after we call? Where it's our 15, our opponent's 15, the small blind, the big blind, to the ante, so 32.5. And let's say we min raised off a 15 big blind stack, so we have to put in 13 more to win 32.5 equals. So now we need 40% equity to break even. Remember, you want to be a little bit tighter, so maybe we need like 42%. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to give our opponents a range. What do we think the player on the button is going to go all in with if they are tight? Again, this could be anything depending on exactly what your particular opponent is doing. Let's presume that they shove with, I don't know, only this. Okay? Click apply, go over to tool, hand range calculator, type in 42%, click calculate range, take it to main window. And as you see, now this is what we should call with. Pocket eights are better, ace jack suited and better, and ace queen offsuit and better. You see that that is different than this calling strategy that's outlined here, because we are folding out. I'm sorry, we should call against a game theory optimal opponent with ace 10 suited, ace 9 suited, ace 8 suited, ace 7 suited, king queen suited, king jack suited. But we're folding those against the tight player. You see ace queen offsuit's in this range, but notice it's not in our range because we would have folded it. That doesn't impact anything. So this is a situation where against a tighter player, you should be calling off tighter, right? Let me show you what will happen if our opponent raises all in really wide now. Again, we won't have that 42% equity. Let's presume we're just against an absolute lunatic. Maybe the guy in the big blind just jams all sorts of bad, let's suppose. So let's give them a very wide range. Again, we're going to need to run roughly that percentage.
You're going to see this more commonly
this
than you're not, by the way.
Everyone's doing this, but let's just show you how to use the program. Let's assume the opponent's jamming all this, okay? Very, very wide.
So
Again,
tilt jams range.
Calculator, give us the same scenario. Take the main window. Now we should call off with all of this. So again, if the hand didn't start in our range, we can't have it, so we can just remove all of these. I'm not going to go through and remove every single one of them, but you get the drift. If the hand's over here, that does not mean that it's in our range because we wouldn't have played it. This is just showing us which hands out of all the hands have 42% equity. So I'll clear this out a little bit to make it easier for you to see. You see here for the suited hands, we should actually be calling with, well, every suited hand we raised, right? Take a look. We raised 9-8 suited, 10-8 suited, etc. We raised all these hands. And now we're actually supposed to call off against the shove with all of them. So against a looser player, if we raise with a hand like Jack-8 suited, and they rip it all in, and you know they're going all in very, very wide, well, now we have a call. So you see, it is not exactly as easy as call with the best hands, fold the garbage hands. When your opponent is playing an absurdly loose strategy, as some people actually will, you will find players who do jam very wide, especially if you raise, let's say, the button, and they're in the small blind, or if you raise the button, they're in the big blind. Against those players, you can't just call off with only the best hands and fold your garbage, because if they are jamming so wide, at some point, even the very marginal hands like 10-8 suited, Jack-8 suited, etc., start to have enough equity to call. Like right here, if you raise the ace-6 offsuit and they jam, you have a call. So please recognize that you should adjust based on your opponent's tendencies. And remember, even in that simulation I just ran, we built in the idea that we wanted to have a bit of an edge. That was not the break-even numbers. Break-even numbers would be even wider because we needed to win 42 or 40% of the time, and I said we wanted to win 42. So I was even building in a bit of an edge that makes it easier for us. As you see here, if we raise the button and let's say somebody attacked jams really wide, as you saw, lots of these suited hands were included, and even some of these offsuit hands. So please, please, please make sure you are running these simulations on your own. And now we're going to have some quizzes to make sure that you fully understand how to play this situation, because this is an important one.
You'll run into that situation where the player is jamming like 70% of hands to a raise. When you're on a final table and you're 5 or 6 handed and you have 15 big blinds or so, and maybe you're the shortish stack, like let's say a player has 80 blinds and there's 2 guys with like 30 blinds, and then there's 3 guys who are at like, 10 to 15 blinds or somewhere in there. You're going to see that jam from the big blind a lot versus the chip leader. And if you realize that scenario is up, then you just need to take hands that play well versus the deck, raise them, and when he jams, call off. So, I mean, a lot of these hands are like that. 10 jack suited is like that. Any ace is like that. Granted, you get a lot more fold equity by straight jamming, but you're going to be put in the situations where you can raise, and he's going to fold the absolute trash worst shit, which is going to be 30% of the time, which is great because 30% of the time you're going to raise and get the fold, and that increase your stack. But when you get jammed on, you have to realize that the calling range becomes much wider, because at that point you're looking to get back in the game. And of course you have to take into consideration ICM factors and things like that, but that's a common scenario you'll see. You'll also see it when a player is chip drunk in the early stages of a tournament, like they've doubled up early, and you're sitting there at like a starting stack that's like 20 blinds because nothing's gone on. You'll see a player just go ahead and take a shot at you no matter what it is. So then you can just easily call off with a lot of his hands in this range. 15 big blinds, you min raise with 9-9 on the 9-9. The button goes all in. What should you do? See, it doesn't tell us our position. If I was under the gun and the button went all in, it's kind of a different story than when I was in the cutoff. But I'm saying it's a call most of the time. Yeah. Profitable call against the button's intrinsic range. Min raise ace jack offsuit from under the gun 1. Under the gun 2 goes all in. These are tough for me. Because I don't give ace jack specifically enough credit. I believe it is the dividing line. I'm going to go ahead and look it up. I think it's supposed to be a call, but I think I would fuck it up in game. So 15 big blinds from under the gun 1 versus an all-in from under the gun 2. Or no, I'm sorry, under the gun 1 versus a 3-bet all-in from the opponent's position of under the gun 2 is the Lojack. Ace jack suited and offsuit is a call. Yeah, I would have fucked it up in game. All right, so it's a call. Wrong. Okay, 15 big blinds min raise with ace jack from under the gun 1. Under the gun 2 goes all in. What should you do? 15 big blinds. Did it say 15? Yeah, 15 big blinds. Under the gun, we raise 3-bet all in. That's a 9-handed table. Under the gun versus 3-bet from under the gun 1. Yeah, now it falls off. Ace jack off is not there. Yeah, I was thinking of an 8-handed table. This is a 9-handed table. So yeah, okay. So it is a fold. I was right. With 15 big blinds, you min raise with ace jack suited from the cutoff. Big blind goes all in. What should you do? I think that's a call. Yeah. 15 big blinds, min raise king 10 off from the cutoff, and the button goes all in. I think it's a fold most of the time versus most players, but there are definitely some players that you want to call it off with. Let's look it up. 15 big blinds, we're in the cutoff. 3-bet all in from the opponent's position of the button. King 10 off is a fold, yes. Okay. Against aggressive raisers, you should go all in or call more often with 15 big blind stacks. You go all in more often, yeah, because you want to mitigate their aggression. So you jam all in, they have no more moves, that's it. All right, let's mark this as complete. I want to take a look at the next section. Facing limpers, that's a big topic. Although it's a short section, let's just do it.
Let's discuss when you are facing limpers, when you have between 12 and 22 big blinds. So as you get shallower and shallower, you're going to find that many players no longer have much of a limping range at all, although some players will still limp from exactly the button and the small blind. Like as we showed you earlier, the optimal strategy is actually to limp a lot of stuff from the small blind. So you want to ask, what is the limper's strategy? And this is where it's really important for you to know, because if they are limping primarily to trap, well then you really don't want to be raising all that often. You definitely want to avoid spots where you'll have to fold a decently strong hand to an all-in. That said, I'm really not doing a whole lot of raising to, let's say, 3.5 big blinds in this situation. Usually if someone limps and I have something like 20 big blinds or less, I am mostly just going all in over their limps unless I think that they are tricky. And if they're tricky, I really just don't even mess around against them very often at all as an exploitative play to sidestep the spots where they limp. I raise with an obvious blocker hand like king jack offsuit or ace 10 offsuit, and then they shove on me. I'll just fold the ace-10 offsuit or king-jack offsuit immediately before the flop if I am pretty sure that they are weak. And I'm sorry, if they have a good hand, if they're tricky. If they're weak, I'm way more inclined to just jam it all in those scenarios, unless I'm in the very early positions as well. So against a weak limper from early position, if they limp, you don't necessarily want to jam for 20 big blinds with something like king-jack offsuit because you have to worry about all the players yet to act. So from the earlier positions, when you're raising the limpers, you usually do want to make it about 3.5 big blinds. But from the later positions, you're going to be more inclined to go all in because you have fewer people yet to act who could have a strong hand just randomly, right? You will find that bluffing may still be viable facing one limper or multiple limpers. And actually, as more people do limp, you should be inclined to jam a little bit wider. And the reason for that is because you now have more money that is probably dead in the pot, meaning they're just going to fold if you go all in. For example, if middle position limps and then everyone folds to you on the button, and let's say you have ace-2 offsuit with 15 big blinds, that's a spot where you could probably just fold. But if middle position limps and then 3 other people limp and now you're on the button with ace-2 offsuit, now you should probably go all in. And the reason is because those additional limpers are just putting money in the pot that they are very rarely going to defend. So definitely be aware of that. Usually the best bluffs are hands with a blocker or hands that have good equity when you expect to get called, like 9-7 suited. You may say, well, shouldn't I just limp behind with the 9-7 suited if it goes limp, 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 and I'm on the button? You can, depending on how tricky you think the first limper is, or depending on how likely you are to get called. But you have to realize, with this 15 big blind stack depth, most people when they limp, they're not looking to call a big all-in. They really just want to see a cheap flop and move forward. As you start to get even shallower and shallower, then you have to be less inclined to jam in spots like this because you have less fold equity. But with a 15 to 22 big blind stack, you're going to find that these shoves will steal the pot very, very frequently, unless, of course, you do run into a tricky limper who limped, aces or whatnot. If you do happen to limp behind, let's say you think a tricky player limps, 3 people limp, and then you limp with 9-8 suited on the button, which is perfectly viable. You can still limp with the reasonable suited aces, the good suited connectors, and the small pairs. If someone does raise, you're going to want to ask, what are my pot odds and implied odds? And you're going to find that at this stack depth, because your low stack to pot ratio, you're just going to have to fold because you're never getting the right implied odds. Like if it goes limp, 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 you limp pocket 2, someone raises to 6 big blinds, you can't put in 5 more big blinds out of your 20 big blind stack because then you've already have a fourth of your money in the pot. You just cannot continue in that situation. So if you do foresee that happening a decent chunk of the time against your particular opponent, you want to make sure your limping range is protected because if you're going to get raised frequently, you should expect that to happen. So let's say early position limps, you're in second position, third position, or early position as well with pocket aces, kings, queens, or ace-king. This is a spot where normally you would certainly just like to raise to 3.5 big blinds or so to get full value from your hand. But if there are players yet to act who you know really like shoving all in, well, you definitely want to limp because that's going to happen very frequently. You always want to make sure that your assessments about your opponents are correct. Obviously, just because they don't shove this time doesn't mean they would not shove way more often than normal. So don't think that like one, call it a failure in this situation where you limp behind with queens and then 4 other people limp and you see the flop. That doesn't necessarily indicate that you made some giant error. But if you find that you think the player's going to raise a lot, but then they just never do, that means your assessment is wrong. Or maybe they think, oh, this guy could be tricky, so I'm going to stay out of their way. So I'm not going to say you always want to slow play against limpers with your best hands, and I would say normally you do just want to play your hands aggressively. But that certainly is a viable consideration. I will generally say, though, that once you start to get down to 20-ish big blinds or shorter, you're going to find that most people just don't limp anymore. And if they do, they are usually either very tricky and very strong, in which case you don't mess around at all, or they are very weak. And if they are very weak and you are in the later position, those really are like free pots that you can steal. People always ask, how do you continuously chip up in pots? Well, you chip up in pots when your opponents are making big errors. And a very big error is to just limp with a whole lot of garbage and then fold to a jam. And in the smaller stakes games against very bad opponents, you will see this happen. And in that spot, you can jam any decent blocker hand or hand with decent equity when you are in the later positions because unless one of the blinds or the players you have to act wake up with a good hand, those pots are yours.
Yep. Let's see. 15 big blinds against a limper. You're incentivized to raise small or go all in more often. I believe it's go all in. Yeah, because you're just trying to take it down. Pick up those blinds. Don't let them see a flop. Fuck that. Oh, well, that's it. Next section is facing a pre-flop raise. Okay, this is a longer one. I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I wanted to show you guys, if we go back to the courses, they've changed the look here a little bit. Come on. So it goes up to like this, and we just click on the Tournament Masterclass. They've updated all this because they updated the Cash Game Masterclass, which I'm going to do after this, which, holy shit, talk about getting deep. You know, we're talking about a month or so down the line getting through the Tournament Masterclass. But this is now how it looks. Introduction. We're on pre-flop strategy. We've gone through all this, including these first 3 sections. We have all this to go in just this section. And then look, we have flop strategy. Turn strategy. Fucking crazy. River strategy. ICM strategy. Adjustments. Finances. You know, other topic. I mean, just crazy shit. I mean, really interesting stuff, and we're going to get super deep. And it's going to take us a while to get through, man, but I'm having a great time doing this every day, and I hope you guys are too. Today is a play day, for sure, and I already found myself looking at tournaments. I may come back and play within the hour, but I don't think it's likely. I have to do a few things before I get started, but I'm definitely going to play early. I'll see you guys later. I'm not going to send out a host. There's a lot of people playing. You can find who you want. And I'll see you back in a little while. Not too long. Maybe 2 o'clock at the latest, so a couple hours. See you later, guys.